It's time now for business with Giles Beckford. Kia ora, Giles. Australia's central bank has, it's taken some steps against the threat of coronavirus. What's happening?
Well, it's the first cab off the rank, and of course much of the talk in the past week or so has been for the likelihood, the need for central banks and governments to step up to the mark when it comes to tackling the impact of coronavirus. So the Reserve Bank of Australia, as expected, cut its cash rate to 0.5%. That's a quarter of a percentage point cut. 0.5% is their cash rate now. The commentary is just dominated by all the usual phrases that you would expect. It says growth in Australia will be noticeably weaker than expected because of the virus. It talks about the impact on jobs, growth, exports, tourism, the works. The bottom line in the end is that it says it's better to cut now and if needs be, perhaps cut again. So this is a stitch in time, they hope in time, to try and save 9 to just shore up the Australian economy. We have a teleconference of the finance ministers of the 7 richest countries, the G7. That'll be in the next 24 hours. Expect more global action on that one. And this RBA statement, I'd have to say, is probably a template for what we'll see from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand in a couple of weeks' time when it has its next interest rate decision. Although they were reluctant 3 weeks ago to be talking about cutting the cash rate, I think the tide of circumstances and events and changes and pressures on Adrian Orr now is irresistible, and we can at the very least expect a quarter of a percentage point cut to the cash rate, which would take us down to 0.75%.
OK, so you start telling us that one of the titans of American corporate sector is dead. Is that oxymoronic? If you're a titan and you're now dead, what's going on?
Well, look, let's not get into classical references too much about this one and the wondering of it. I wouldn't normally do an obituary. People die all the time, notable and unnotable. But this is a guy called Jack Welsh, who was the head of General Electric. And he built that company up over a 20-year period from the late 80s through to the early part of the 2000s into a $400 billion company from $12 billion. Just to give you some scale, that's twice the value of the New Zealand economy. Now, to say that he was a hard man is probably a little bit of an understatement. He is, depending on your point of view, a champion of corporate growth, free enterprises, wealth creation, globalism, or on the other side, he was a rapacious global businessman who let nothing and nobody stand in his way. He had a reputation when he acquired businesses of going in hard, restructuring them. He sacked tens of thousands of workers, and that earned him the nickname of Neutron Jack, because the buildings were still standing, but the people didn't survive when he arrived. He also was particularly tough on managers. He sort of devised a 3-tier scale on measuring them. He didn't have too much respect for them. One of his notable phrases was saying, the last thing you want is to have a kick-ass manager in your a kiss-ass manager in your organisation, because they just are parasites. They sort of rise off the work of other people. They take credit for it. They add nothing of value to your company. So from that point of view, there's probably some people there that we might recognise and identify with from that point of view. But as you say, one of those names of the past, one of those big names has gone. Quite whether we'll see his like again, I suspect not.
So, Giles, tell us, at the end of the day, where do we finish up on the markets as well?
Well, for the past week, I've just been saying, it's a Sierra red, it's a Sierra red, it's a Sierra red. Today it was green. Green of profits, green of rising markets, following on from Wall Street's 5% gain. And everybody now is pinning hopes that central banks will come to the party. So that's buoyed investors to get back in, buy the cheap stocks as they see them. So our share market was up to about 2.2%, 240 odd points. We were up more than 3% at one stage, but we gave back some of those gains. And for the New Zealand dollar, 62.6 US cents, 95.6 Australia, and if you feel like you need to go to Britain, 49 British pence.
Thanks, Giles. That's Giles Beckford, our business editor, with the numbers today.